The question is that this bill now be read a second time. I call the member for Riverina.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Speaker. And freedom is important, and we just heard 15 minutes of why freedom is important to the member for Kennedy, and much of what he said, I understand. I completely understand where he's coming from, and he, like me, represents a country electorate, and people in country electorates take their freedom very seriously indeed. And I know when I was Deputy Chair of the NSC, national security, of course, is the hallmark of a good government, and we banned Huawei. And I know that following that decision, which didn't go down well in Beijing, Britain followed suit, Estonia, Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the list goes on and on, Latvia, Lithuania, Portugal, Romania, Sweden. All of those countries were concerned that Huawei, leading global provider of ICT infrastructure and smart devices, would have too much control over the information disseminating around our nation and those people in the nations that I just mentioned. But indeed, would they have control over systems where our hospitals were operating, over traffic lights? These are important discussions to have, and as a government, you need to ensure that the safety and security of your people is number one. And at the time, Huawei was indeed a sponsor of the Canberra Raiders Rugby League Football Club in the National Rugby League. And there's a lot of pressure on Australia. And I raise that in the context of this important debate because freedoms are important. And they are certainly important to those who sit on the same side of the parliament that I do. I am perturbed that in the death throes of the final parliamentary sitting week of the Senate, not that long ago, that this particular legislation was rushed through, was guillotined by a government when it came in May 2022, said that it would be more transparent, said that it would be more open, said that it would respect parliamentary procedure and protocols and process, and yet on this and other bills it did not. And even when you think back 12 months ago to the appropriation bills for the budget, the second budget brought down by the member for Rankin, those bills were guillotined. And I have never, in all of my time here, and this is my 5th term, seen the appropriations bills being shut off and members not being allowed to speak on those particular bills. And why you would have a digital identity bill and members unable to speak on it is beyond reason and beyond belief. These amendments put forward to enhance privacy protections for Australians who choose to use digital ID, they were not supported. We oppose these bills. We believe they're half-baked, and it's not just the coalition that thinks that they're half-baked. It's not just the member for Kennedy and I'm sure others. I've had a lot of correspondence into my office from people who don't usually reach out about legislation. They just go with the flow. But in particular, there were 2 emails I received that I felt necessary and moved to put on the record, on the parliamentary record, on the Hansard, because the people who sent them in were very concerned about the digital ID bills and what they might entail for them and others. And Jenny Madden from Uranquinny, I've known Jenny for a long, long time. Jenny is a good citizen. She is a passionate Australian. She said, and I quote, "Although I'm a user of My Health Record and an enthusiastic advocate of such a resource, I am greatly disturbed by the potential ramifications of the Digital ID Bill 2024. Even though I completely understand that it is more onerous to use numerous different identification documents such as birth certificates, passports and driving licences to prove ID, It is in this very aspect of variation that safety lies. With the centralisation of data comes great danger. Firstly, the federal government has a poor track record of securing our information. For example, in 2020, security researchers warned the public against using MyGovID due to security flaws in its design, which the Australian Tax Office declined to fix. Moreover, an article published by the ABC last year titled "Cyber Black Market Selling Hacked ATO and MyGov Login Shows Medibank and Optus Only Tip of Iceberg" reported on numerous data breaches involving the Australian Tax Office, National Disability Insurance Scheme and MyGov. But what I even find more concerning is that a single digital identity database could facilitate a system of surveillance of Australians not unlike that of China's social credit score system. That's what Jenny Madden had to say. I understand completely from where she's coming. Dan Grentel of North Wagga, he said this: "I would like to express my disapproval of the proposed digital ID legislation on behalf of my family, myself and I think the majority of people of the Riverina and Australia who actually know how much of an overreach of government this is. Australians have to ask themselves, do they really want the government acting as gatekeeper over every aspect of your life? I know I certainly do not." Now, they are just normal, everyday, ordinary Australians. They speak for a lot of people. They're good people, and what they've put in their emails to me are concerns I know that would be shared by a number of regional Australians, a number of Australians, full stop. And, you know, I know that more than 10 million people already use the Australian government ID system via MyGovID. I get that, that banks and, dare I say, even supermarket loyalty cards have a lot of information on people. But only recently I had a bank that I have been with since I was a teenager, and rest assured that is a long time ago. More's the pity, Deputy Speaker. But pursuing me via text, via email to identify actually who I was. Now, all they required was my licence number, my driver's licence number. Not only the licence number on the front, but the number that appears on the back. I'm just going through the process of renewing my licence, and because I've got now a paper form from New South Wales, that number on the back wasn't the number that they required, so I have to ring the bank back and give them the proper number when I get my little laminated licence in the mail in coming weeks. But I digress. But as I said to the person on the end of the phone when I finally rang under the threat of having my bank accounts closed, fair dinkum, if you can't find my name, just do a Google search. Don't believe everything you read when you do that Google search. But I was worried about being scammed because so many people, they get text messages via their mobile phones, via their iPads, they get emails, and from supposed trustworthy institutions, but they are scammers. They are scammers in far-off countries who just want to take their money, get their identity and use it. And I know that a lot of MPs use social media, and many MPs have people putting up fake accounts purporting to be those members. And I also know that we've been told not to use TikTok. I can't understand why any MP would want to use TikTok. They might want to reach out to younger members, but it is a security risk. But people are also concerned that with this particular legislation, they are concerned not only with the contents of it. How can Australians trust Labor to manage digital ID when they won't even allow parliamentary scrutiny? And why does the government feel the need to rush legislation such as this through if it is so important that people's representative in the parliament can't speak on it? I'm glad I've got the opportunity, but my Senate colleagues were not. They were not given that opportunity. And for a government that said that they would be more transparent, why did they rush this through the Senate in the finishing hours of that last parliamentary sitting week? Labor's bills don't adequately ensure that the bill is truly voluntary, because every Australian deserves to receive the same quality of services regardless of how they're accessing them, be it through digital ID or face-to-face and so forth. The government shouldn't proceed with these bills until such time as they've reformed the Privacy Act. There should be simultaneously private sector participation in the Australian government digital identity system, ensuring that the digital ID is a truly national, whole-of-economy solution. Now, when in government, we did some careful, calibrated work to progress the AGDIS, the digital identity system. We worked hard, we worked in good faith, we took on board consultation from stakeholders, we made sure that what we were doing was transparent. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about this, and there are many, many Australians who are concerned that that hacking and professionally done security flaws and breaches will happen as a result of this sort of system if and when enacted. Now, we released, as the coalition government, draft legislation in 2021 to further regulate digital identity. The important word in that sentence is draft. We put it out there. We made sure that people were able to have a good look at it. We made sure that people were able to respond to their local members of parliament, because that's what being a federal member of the House of Representatives is. It's about taking feedback from the constituency. But this was done, so to speak, in the dead of night. This was done on a whim by Labor, and I have to say there's been a lot happen this year. There just has. A lot of legislation, a lot of things done in the parliament. This particular legislation and the National Disability Insurance Scheme are probably the two things that my office, my electorate offices at Wagga Wagga and Parkes have received the most traffic about. And when it happened, and so quickly and so rushed through the Senate in that parliamentary sitting week, I was inundated with emails. I was surprised and amazed at how many people approached me when I was out at events and in the street and wherever else I happened to be in my local communities, by the number of people who came up to me and asked me about it because they were that concerned. That's not normally the case. People will often, yes, they'll get animated about things that might happen in the budget, things that didn't happen in the budget and all that sort of thing, but the amount of people who were very concerned that their privacy was going to be breached because of what Labor did and rushed this through the Senate was, quite frankly, that surprised me. The digital identity legislation introduced by the Albanese Labor government is very different, very different to the draft bill which the coalition released. And that concerns me as well. Now, the coalition did put forward amendments designed to fix what we see as weaknesses in the bill. And our amendments included the following: a much stronger guarantee having a digital identity would be voluntary. No Australian would be required to have one. Someone would not face a lower quality of service should they wish to use traditional paper-based identity documents. Removing the phasing provisions so that the private sector can be involved from the outset. How important is that? And imposing a clear requirement that changes to the Privacy Act must be made before this legislation came into force. Now, as a reasonable person, I would have thought that those amendments were reasonable to the government. Not onerous, working in a bipartisan fashion with the government to try to strengthen legislation that Labor felt the need to just ram through the Senate. And it always bothers me when legislation starts in the Senate and then people in the Senate, our representatives in the Senate, fine States House that it is, do not get the opportunity to speak. The amendments were just brushed aside. That bothers me. Now, the government refused to accept our amendments. More is the pity. And accordingly, the coalition voted to oppose the government's digital identity legislation because, as I said a short time ago, it is half-baked. That's a good description of it. And we want to make sure that any legislation that comes before the House is what it ought to be, is given the proper consideration, not just in this place, the Parliament on the Hill, but indeed right throughout this wide Brown land.
I thank the member. The time being approximately 1 p.m, the Federation Chamber is now suspended and will recommence when the chair is resumed at 4 p.m.